For generations, Canada was the answer. It was the country people around the world dreamed about. Stable, safe, fair. A place where you could work hard, raise a family, and build a life without fear. People spent years and life savings trying to get here. Canada was, by almost any measure, one of the great destinations on Earth. And in 2026, something is happening that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. People are leaving. Not just visitors, not just people who never settled. Canadians, people born here, people who chose here, people who fought their way here and finally made it, are packing up and going. Some to the United States. Some back to countries their families originally came from. Some anywhere the numbers work better. And the reason is shocking, because it isn't that they stopped loving this country. Almost none of them will tell you that. It's something far more painful, and it says something serious about what Canada has become for ordinary people. Stay with me, because this is the story that ties together everything we've covered on this channel. Let's be precise about who we're talking about, because this matters enormously. The people leaving Canada are not, by and large, people who failed here. That's the assumption, and it's wrong. Broadly, the pattern points the other way. It's working-age people, often skilled, often educated, frequently in their late 20s through 40s. Healthcare workers, tech workers, engineers, tradespeople, people in the prime earning and family-forming years of their lives. In other words, exactly the people any country most needs to keep. There's a second group that deserves attention, and it's one people rarely talk about. Some of those leaving are newcomers, people who immigrated to Canada relatively recently, did everything asked of them, and then discovered that the life they'd been promised wasn't available at the price they could pay. They came for opportunity, hit the same wall as everyone else, and moved on. That's a country failing to keep the people it invited. And that reframes the whole issue. This isn't a story about who comes to Canada. It's a story about whether Canada can hold on to anyone at all once they get here, born here or not. The first reason is the one we've traced through every video on this channel. In much of Canada, an ordinary income no longer buys an ordinary life. We've covered the pieces. Housing detached from wages. Rent consuming the money you'd need to escape rent. Ownership sliding from difficult to fantasy. Essential jobs that don't cover the cost of living in the city where the job exists. Stack all of that together, and you get a very specific realization, and it arrives at kitchen tables all over this country. I am doing everything right, and it is not working, and it is not going to start working. That's the thought that precedes a passport application. Not anger, arithmetic. People run the numbers on staying, and the numbers say no. The second reason is geography, and it's brutal. Canada shares a border with a country where, in a lot of professions, the same qualifications and the same work pay significantly more. That has been true for a long time. What changed is that Canadian costs rose to a point where the gap stopped being tolerable. For years, the trade made sense to people. Yes, you might earn more south of the border. But Canada offered other things: healthcare, safety, social stability, a certain quality of life. People weighed it and chose Canada, gladly, and thought it was a good deal. But that calculation depended on Canadian life being affordable. Once housing costs climbed to where they are, the equation broke. Now you're being asked to accept lower pay and pay more to live. And people in high-demand fields, nurses, doctors, engineers, skilled trades, tech workers, are the ones with the mobility to act on that. They can leave, so some do. The painful part is that these are exactly the people this country spent money educating and training. Canada pays to build the skills, and another country gets the productive decades. The third reason cuts deep, because it undermines the trade people accepted. Canadians have long tolerated higher taxes and lower pay than their southern neighbors, on the understanding that they get something back: healthcare, public services, infrastructure that works. That was the bargain, and most people considered it fair. But when people struggle to find a family doctor, face long waits for care, or see services stretched thin in their community, that bargain starts to feel one-sided. You're paying the price of the deal and not reliably receiving the benefit. To be fair, This is not a uniquely Canadian problem, and healthcare systems everywhere are under strain. But that doesn't change how it feels to someone doing the math on staying. If the compensation for lower pay and higher costs is a strong social safety net, and that net is visibly fraying, then the compensation is shrinking while the costs keep rising. But here's the real reason, the shocking one underneath all of it. People aren't leaving because they stopped loving Canada. They're leaving because they stopped believing Canada would work out for them. That's a completely different thing, and it's far more serious. Countries don't run on GDP alone. They run on belief, on a shared expectation that if you contribute, you'll be okay, that your effort connects to your outcome, that the next decade will be better than this one, for you and for your kids. That belief is what makes people stay through hard times, pay their taxes, and invest their lives in a place. What's happening in Canada right now is that a lot of ordinary people have quietly stopped believing that. Not dramatically. Nobody announces it. They just look at the arithmetic, the housing, the wages, the years already spent trying, and conclude that the future they were promised isn't coming. And once someone stops believing a place will work out for them, leaving stops being a betrayal and starts being a plan. That's the shock. The exodus isn't driven by hatred of this country. It's driven by grief for the version of it people expected to inherit. And they'll tell you that themselves. Most of them leave loving Canada, which is exactly what makes it sad. Let me make it real. Picture a nurse. She's been working in a Canadian hospital for 9 years. She's excellent at her job, and she believes in it. She chose it, deliberately, because she wanted work that mattered. She's also exhausted. The unit is short-staffed, as we covered in the jobs video, so she's doing more than her share, permanently. And despite a solid professional salary, she rents. She's watched home prices in her city move further out of reach every year she's worked. Then a recruiter contacts her from across the border with an offer, significantly more money, and a city where she could actually buy a home. She agonizes. This is her country. Her family is here. Her patients are here, and she cares about them. She isn't looking for an escape. She's looking for a reason to stay, and she can't find one that survives contact with a calculator. So she takes it, and a hospital that was already short-staffed becomes shorter, which makes it harder for the nurses who remain, which makes them more likely to leave too. That's how a country loses people. Not in a wave. One reluctant, heartbroken decision at a time. And the cost of that lands on everyone who stays. Start with the direct loss. Every skilled worker who leaves takes their training with them. Training this country often paid to provide. It's a transfer of value out of Canada, and we get nothing back for it. Then there's the compounding effect, which is worse. When skilled people leave, the workload lands on those who remain. Conditions get harder, which pushes more people to leave, which makes it harder still. It's the same spiral we saw with mechanics and with essential workers, and it runs faster once it starts. Then there's what economists would call the demographic hit and what everyone else would call the obvious thing. These are people in their family-forming years. They're not just taking their labor. They're taking their future children, their future community involvement, their next 40 years of contribution. And there's a quieter cost. Every person who leaves and tells friends back home that things are better elsewhere chips away at the belief of the people still here. Doubt spreads. That's how an exodus builds momentum. Now, let's be honest and complete, because this deserves an accurate picture rather than a dramatic one. Canada remains a country enormous numbers of people want to live in. Far more people arrive than leave. By global standards, it remains stable, safe, and genuinely desirable. And the people who leave will often tell you they miss it deeply. There are also real advantages here that don't show up on a paycheck. Safety, political stability, health care that, whatever its strain, does not bankrupt people the way it can elsewhere. Plenty of Canadians who moved away have come back for exactly those reasons. So this isn't a story about Canada collapsing. It isn't. It's a story about a country that is struggling to hold on to its own people, which is a specific, fixable problem, and a warning rather than an obituary. The honest framing is this: Canada's problem isn't that nobody wants to be here. It's that being here has become very hard to afford for the people who make the place run. That's a housing and wages problem wearing the costume of a migration story. So where does this go? The fix isn't complicated to state, even if it's brutally hard to do. People stay where they can build a life, make housing attainable, make wages match the cost of living, and make essential services work, and the arithmetic that's pushing people out reverses. There is no clever policy that keeps skilled people in a country where they cannot afford to live. The retention strategy is affordability. Until that changes, the departures continue, quietly, one competent, reluctant person at a time. And it leaves an uncomfortable question. What happens to a country that spends decades educating its people and then can't offer them a life worth staying for? So I want to hear from you, honestly. Have you left Canada? Where did you go? And are you glad? Are you thinking about it, and what's holding you here? Did you come to Canada hoping for something and find it wasn't what you expected? Or have you left and come back and found the grass wasn't greener? Tell me in the comments below. Keep it civil and keep it personal. I'd rather have real stories than an argument. I read every one. And if you want honest, clear-eyed breakdowns of the forces reshaping life in Canada, subscribe to Canada Insider. There's a lot more of this story to tell.